Welcome to our podcast, A Novel Talk, co-hosted by Carl Lee, and I'm Wendy Kendall. My mystery book, Cat Out of the Bag, that's cat with a K, is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, and all over. Catherine Watson, a purse designer and amateur sleuth, goes from designer bags to body bags when she's faced with a murder mystery. In the prequel, Purstachio Makes a Splash, Catherine and Mayor Brenda Durling investigate a chilling cold case. I'm busy working on the exciting sequel, and in November, my new mystery romance set in Catherine's Bayside, Washington will be available. Snow Cookies to Die For. Thank you to all the readers who've let me know how much they enjoy my books. And here comes your co-host.
And one of those readers who enjoy your books. Hi, my name is Carl Lee, and I write paranormal fantasy, which really makes me excited about this month's guest, Wendy.
Yes, our guest today is an Arizona native. The strong women from her own family lineage are the inspiration for the female lead characters who are willing to risk it all for family in her paranormal Creekside Dreams series. Her spirited books, Sweet Dreams at the Palace Hotel, and her newest, Promise in a Dream, keep readers turning pages as otherworldly figures mix with the small town residents. When not writing at home or in a hotel lobby, author Stella Jayne Phillips can be found enjoying her active life with yoga, line dancing, reading, cooking, traveling, volunteering, and spending time with family and friends. She lives in Scottsdale, Arizona with her husband and small white dog, Candy. So happy to introduce this author from the Wild Rose Press. Welcome to A Novel Talk, Stella Jayne Phillips.
Thank you for inviting me, Wendy. Sweet Dreams at the Palace Hotel is the first in the Creekside Dreams series, my debut book, and I'm always happy to talk about it.
Well, it was a really great book, and as I mentioned before, I also write paranormal and hope to have a debut book soon. As another paranormal writer, I was wondering what you based the town of Creekside and the legend of the Palace Hotel on.
Arizona is riddled with ghost towns and small towns, and the communities have learned that they can use the legends of ghosts to bring people to see the town, even if the only thing that's there is small boutiques and restaurants and unusual historic buildings. Creekside is sort of a mix of a number of small towns, including some that were originally mining towns, some were ranching towns, and some were towns that were attached to the smelter, copper smelter. The small towns claim the ghosts and celebrate the ghosts because it helps with tourism.
Mm-hmm. I've been to Sedona, and we took a trip to Jerome. Jerome. Very cool little town. So I was hoping you were going to say something like you pulled bits and pieces, because I saw bits and pieces of what I had seen when I visited.
Yeah, Jerome, I'm dating myself, but at one time, Jerome was a true ghost town when I was a child. You could drive into Jerome, and there was, I think, 3 businesses. One was a restaurant that specialized in peach cobbler, and one was a bar, which is still there, and one was a very small hotel, plus the Catholic Church, which is on the hill there. And
Right.
That was all the other buildings were empty. That's not true anymore.
No.
There's lots of people living there. But the ghosts are, I think the ghosts still outnumber the people.
I love that. Well, your protagonist, Nikki, is asked by a friend why she bought the Palace Hotel. And she says 3 reasons: Creekside's cooler than the desert, price was good, and it's haunted. How cool is that? Well, as a reader, it's very cool. Will you tell us about the Palace as a hotel and its challenges?
Turning the palace into a viable business um, that can compete with modern hotels is a trick because it is a historic building. And that means that you can only do so much and remain true to the historic architecture. Nikki finds herself in a position of she can't tear out half the rooms to make the rooms bigger or something like that, or change the whole downstairs to lobby and make it like a large hotel because it wouldn't have enough rooms to be viable. So, what she does instead is she plays up the historic aspect and then offers a more homey, intimate lodging experience. And that's a trick. It's one of the reasons she goes with a breakfast in the morning, a homemade breakfast in the morning, and keeps the bar open in the evening to encourage people to gather there. So it's like you're visiting someone's home instead of staying in a hotel.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I loved that aspect of the hotel. I thought that was amazing. I would love to stay at a hotel like that. Um, I love paranormal, as I've said. Um, can you tell us a little about your choice of the scent of lavender to represent Victoria's presence, her ghost scent, if you will?
Well, my grandmother was very fond of lavender. In fact, she used it in all the drawers where her clothing were. And so if you were around my grandmother, you got that slight lavender scent. And so when I was creating Victoria, the fact that she kind of brings the calm for a ghost ambience to the hotel, where I thought she should have the same scent as my very calm grandmother. And so I gave her that. Plus, she's the right time period. My grandmother was born in just before the 1900s. And that would have been in the same neighborhood as Victoria.
And lavender is a very calming scent.
It is.
That's such a sweet sentiment with your
It
grandmother.
is.
I love that. Uh, a strong female lead character is certainly the case with Nikki in Sweet Dreams at the Palace Hotel. Would you share a little about the person that the character Nikki is?
Well, by the time we meet Nikki, or she takes over the Palace Hotel, she's had a number of um, obstacles thrown in her path and things she's had to pivot and move on from, some losses. And she's had to pretty much reinvent herself. And rather than letting those things get her down, she's taken a good look at what it is she really wants rather than just what she thought she wanted, and decided that this was a better option than what she had chosen previously. And she's going to make success out of it. The fact that her brothers believe in her enough that they're willing to help with the financing is a good indication that they have a lot of respect for what it is she's capable of. And that gives her an additional confidence to go forward and reach for what she needs.
So Nikki is a very strong character and very obviously is the protagonist, very prominent in the book. But Victoria is also very prominent throughout the book, and they seem to live kind of parallel lives. Could you talk a little about that relationship?
Victoria is the original innkeeper of the Palace Hotel. She actually had it built, but she was in when the palace opened in 1917. It was very unusual for a woman to run a business by herself, and certainly an inn, a commercial inn with a bar. Yes, they ran boarding houses, but not generally an inn. And that's what Victoria did. She not only ran the inn, but she had a lover and she had a child, and no one was sure who the child's father was. So she lived a life that was way before her time. And Nikki is taking a similar path in that she's on her own and she's running the hotel by herself, which, while not as odd or unusual as it was at Victoria's time, still has some of the same issues. It's tough being the one in charge, and it and where the buck stops. And so, yes, they're living parallel lives, and Victoria keeps reminding her that there's more to life than just running the hotel.
I love Victoria.
So often in movies and TV shows, music plays an important role in setting the changing moods through a story. Can you talk a little about how you also used music in your books?
I started out that the music was going to reflect the original time period of the hotel. But what I discovered is the characters kind of took on that responsibility. And by the time the book was finished, the music reflected not just Victoria's time, but Nikki's personality and her two brothers' personality and her nephew's personality, because, like my family, everybody had to get involved and have their 2 cents worth. So the playlist kept changing. The You have the Beach Boys with Patrick, and a number of other instances where you can identify modern music or different generational music depending on the age of the person who put it in there. And that's what happened. I also tried to the hotels that I've stayed in that were similar to this generally had a quiet hour, um, hours from around 10 until 6 or whenever they started breakfast in the morning. And so I tried to reflect that also with music, that that music around the time the bar closed was going to suddenly go from lively, or what would be lively, and to some type of quiet, because you want the hotel to settle down and go to sleep.
That's interesting. I like that. I just was happy to hear the songs in my head when they kept changing. I Big music fan.
I
Um,
felt like that too. I felt like it really added to the ambiance of the story so much.
oh, that's a good word. I like that. I'm going to use the word ambiance. Um, so,
It
getting
was
back to
supposed to be so, yes, good, great.
getting back to Victoria. I told you I love her. She seems to be continuing at the palace rather than haunting it. Like, it's not that she can't leave; she just chooses not to. Can you tell us about her interactions with the living at the hotel?
Well, I'm glad you caught that, because the premise of the existence of Victoria is that what if spirits, instead of being trapped here, could choose to stay? What would they want, and why would they choose to stay if they weren't staying because they had to, or because they had to finish a request or something like that. But if they chose to stay because they wanted to relive moments that were important in their lives. And Victoria, she can't get away from being the innkeeper. There's a couple places where she actually hints to the living that something needs to be done. Do it now, by being there. She also um, has an opportunity to find someone that she probably didn't realize she was searching for. Um, but that's not why she stayed. Um, and the fact that she loved life enough to want to continue there, even though she wasn't alive, um, tells you something about the strength of her personality.
Yes, it does. And I write paranormal. I see the motivations behind ghosts.
Well,
There's an interesting romance between Nikki and Alex. Can you tell us a little about the innkeeper and the chief?
well, both they they're both at a place when they meet that they think they've got it under control. They know exactly where they're going, they believe. They know what they need to get there. And it's taken them a while. They've Alex is a single father, and he's finally got his little world under control and a job he enjoys. And Nikki has now has a business that she's going to run, and she knows just how she wants things to turn out. And then they meet, and they think that's going to be enough. And then they meet, and they both wonder, is there something more? And am I brave enough to risk messing with what's good, get more?
And that is a real cliffhanger. It's I love that as just one of the threads in this beautiful book.
Yes. And speaking of the romance between Nikki and Alex, um, there's also paranormal romance in the story with the ghosts. What draws you to writing paranormal romances?
The idea that we can't touch love. Sometimes we think we see it or we hear it in the words of people, but we can't touch love in actuality. And yet, most people believe it exists, at least one form or another. And if we're willing to believe in something you can't touch pretty much universally, why can't there be other things we can't touch that are just as real? Maybe not as prevalent, but just as real.
I
And
like that.
That is truly thought provoking. Well, as the hotel keeper, Nikki provides breakfast for her guests and also has the Victoria's Bar. And you enjoy cooking yourself. So I wanted to ask, what's a favorite breakfast that you like to cook that Nikki might consider serving?
well, Nikki and I have something in common, and that is we prefer not to be stressed in the morning. We want to cook totally prepped before we get up. And so one thing Nikki makes that I make is blueberry bread pudding for breakfast. And you can do all the work the night before and set it in the refrigerator. And then when you drag yourself out from under the covers, pop it in the oven. And exactly my kind of recipe. And it's my husband's favorite dish. That doesn't hurt either.
Yes.
Sounds delicious.
I can almost smell it cooking.
So another delicious aspect of your story is the story itself. Would you be willing to read an excerpt from your book for our readers?
Why, yes, I would.
Thanks.
I'd love part of it. It's it's interesting. The book changed a great deal from the original draft, which is not a surprise. I expected that, but there are pieces of it that are still from the original, and so I picked one of the original pieces to read. Um, and this conversation is between Nikki and a hotel guest named Mr. Wyatt, which that name might sound familiar since Victoria's name is Victoria Wyatt. Sitting at the front desk, responding to emails on her laptop and humming along to Nat King Cole's Autumn Leaves, Nikki glanced up to find RJ Wyatt watching. Hi, are you enjoying your weekend, Mr. Wyatt? She asked. Please call me RJ, he nodded. For a small town, Creekside certainly believes in entertainment. Do you mind if I ask you questions about Victoria and the hotel? Of course not. Nikki closed the laptop. Stories about our famous ghosts help me stay in business. Nikki handed him a copy of the hotel's brochure, folded to the section giving a brief history of the palace. It's one reason room 15 is popular. Frowning, he took the brochure. Did Victoria Wyatt actually die in room 15? Legend claims she did, although there are multiple versions of her passing. You wouldn't think that would make the room particularly attractive, but it's our most popular room. He slipped the brochure into his backpack. But it wasn't a violent death or early death. Some claim she died quietly in her sleep. Others say the housekeeper found her in the rocking chair facing the window, waiting for RJ, her son, to return. Another story says she died on the settee in the lobby, looking out the window. So maybe the room's not really special? Who knows, Nikki admitted. The Creekside Reporter ran an obituary at the time that stated only that there would be a graveside service for Victoria. No details of her passing. Would the newspaper office have copies of the papers from that time? I have no idea, Nikki admitted. But until a few months ago, the Reporter was owned by the same family for several generations. Nikki slid the laptop into the safe under the front desk. Are you a history buff, RJ? At the moment, I'm focusing on my family's history, he admitted. Victoria Wyatt was my great-grandmother. Although my father never met her, I'm also trying to determine who my great-grandfather was. Nikki realized Victoria recognized RJ, and so did Smokey. Victoria visited his room. Smokey followed him through the hotel. I wish you luck in your quest, she didn't ask. Do you see Victoria when she visits your room, or Smokey when he follows you up the stairs? Laptop bag thrown over his shoulder, RJ waved to Nikki and slipped out the front door into the early evening. Beside the lobby window, Victoria stood staring toward the sidewalk. Smokey, his ears pricked up, sat beside her. As Nikki watched, RJ slipped out of sight. Victoria and Smokey disappeared.
I love that scene. I love that scene. Goosebumps. Thank you for the reading. I hope our readers enjoyed it as much.
I was happy to read it. I love this story.
I really enjoyed it too, and I'm sure our listeners did. Thank you so much, Stella Jayne Phillips, for joining us for A Novel Talk. Listeners, you will want to check out the website stellajanephillips.com for more information about her books, to read her fun blog, and so much more. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And remember, a novel read leads to a novel talk.